Layer 2 security doesn't have a one-size-fits-all solution. There isn't an easy button for it. Rather, it's a layering of multiple techniques to achieve as much protection as is required. I'll start by discussing a feature known as port security. In essence, it limits the number of MAC addresses and even which MAC addresses are allowed to send inbound packets on a switch port. Limiting the number of MAC addresses can prevent attacks like DHCP starvation, where tens or hundreds of MACs will show up on a single interface. When enabled on a port by default, only a single MAC address will be learned incoming on that port, and the logic is first come, first served. This means if you have multiple MAC addresses living off this port, whoever sends a packet first wins. The default violation mode is to shut down the port if additional MACs arrive. I always adjust this behavior, as seen below. While port security can be applied to a trunk port, I wouldn't recommend it. It's usually best to add protection to standard access ports only. Once in interface configuration mode, the port security command is entered. Config T, interface FA01. Now, switch port, port security. This enables port security with default settings. Having said that, I never leave it default, as it will always cause issues. I always increase the number of allowed MAC addresses to 5 or more with switch port, port security, maximum 5. Remember, if a port has a phone and data device, that's 2 MAC addresses right there. I almost always also use switch port, port security, violation, restrict. This will drop all frames from any unauthorized MACs and increment the security violation count. The protection action does the same as restrict, but doesn't increment the security violation count. Remember that shutdown action is the default. As MACs are learned, they won't time out. So if a MAC address is learned on a port, it will stay associated with that port until the switch is rebooted. The aging command can set a timeout for the entries. Switch port, port security, aging, time, 10. This sets the aging time to 10 minutes, after which entries will time out and be relearned. There are more options like sticky addresses. This is configured under interface configuration mode also. Interface FA02, switch port, port security, MAC address, sticky. Sticky addresses can be manually configured, but are not recommended. Rather, they should be learned dynamically. When a sticky address is learned, it's automatically added to the running configuration for that port. If the switch reboots now, it will relearn everything again. If the sticky commands in the running config needs to be saved permanently, the admin can issue a copy run start. MAC addresses can be statically configured with interface FA0/3, switch port, port security, MAC address 200.0000.0001. If I'm using the default learning of one address, then port 3 here will only allow the single static address that I entered. If there are more allowed, the static address will occupy one of those entries. Once everything is configured, verification can be done with a show run interface FA0/1 to see which config commands I've put on the interface. Additional info can also be seen with show port security interface FA0/1. It shows the port current status, what modes it's configured for, the number of MACs currently learned, and how many MACs can be learned. Port security is a great first step in protecting user ports.